Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. This session is called Cybersecurity and Emerging Technologies in the Ocean Sector. So we're going to have two presentations that will consider maritime cybersecurity awareness in the context of IMO guidance on shipboard risk management and an improved security posture in maritime operations, as well as multiple emerging technologies that enhance trust and security in the ocean sector. First up, we have a presentation from Jan Carlson, Product and Service Development Manager for Swedish firm Secure State Cyber, an independent cybersecurity services provider for government agencies, healthcare, and international enterprises. Mr. Carlson is a certified IT auditor and risk manager with more than 15 years experience as a consultant in the cybersecurity area, doing cybersecurity assessments and compliance audits, as well as verifying IT security controls at military testing facilities, including Navy command and control systems. Mr. Carlson is going to be joined by Justin Gratto, Senior Security Advisor with Secure State Cyber Inc., which is the company's first Canadian office, which has just opened here in Halifax recently. Jan, Justin.
So thank you very much, Jeff, for the introduction. And as a Swede, maybe I just need to get one thing out of your head. I'm not related to Eric Carlson, the captain of Ottawa Senators. That was the only thing people were asking me last week. We were at CanSec. And at one point I started to think, maybe I should, what if I say yes? Could have been interesting.
My name is Justin Grotto. I recently retired from the military after 11 years, 8 months service. The last part of my career was in Ottawa, doing cybersecurity for the military.
Yes, and it feels good to bring Bruno's back home.
Oh yeah, I was born in New Glasgow, so and I left New Glasgow 12 years ago to join the military. I'm very happy to be back, and especially with the opening of Cove, and there's so much going on in Halifax. It's amazing. Glad to be back.
Yeah, and it also feels good to see IKEA store opening again. That's that makes the Swede feel at home. And then you go to the downtown city and you see, oh, it's Mamma Mia theater. That's like that's all you need. IKEA and ABBA. That's
now at ABBA Museum.
We're here to talk about cybersecurity. So just a short background on our company. We started in Sweden in 2005, helping mostly the government agencies and the healthcare sector in Sweden. And so the office, new office in Halifax is our first international one. And we are really looking forward to develop our business in Nova Scotia. Yeah. Our services include a maritime cyber scan, where you can actually check your compliance against the new IMO guidelines. We can help you with risk assessments, cybersecurity audits, vulnerability management, and also monitoring services. And that's one of the reasons why we chose Atlantic Canada for our office. It's because of the time zones. You can actually cover North America and most of Europe from this region. Yes, and this is what we are actually going to talk about now. What you see on the screen is it's a short clip from a site where they visualize denial of service attacks that's going on right now. And this is also significant of the change we have seen in the IT industry, or in any kind of industry, for the past decade. That the shift from something that you think you can protect yourself against, but it's actually a war out there. And the things that have changed is also affecting the maritime industry, because sooner or later, right now, thank God, it's only land-based attacks, but the targets will soon be on sea as well. And you can imagine a denial of service attack on an autonomous vehicle, just in the presentation we saw just before us. So what's new? This is the complex interconnections and connectivity between different parties and different parts of your ecosystem. You're depending on cloud services, outsourced services. You have a whole ecosystem of partners helping you out to protect your digital assets, creating value for your customers. And that complexity has definitely increased for the last decade. You also have a higher and higher dependency on IT and IT systems, and that's also something that makes things harder in information security perspective. And the third part is the threat actors. Some of you might think of the threat actor as a hacker, a teenage guy sitting in his mom's basement with a baseball cap on, drinking Jolt Cola. Forget that picture. The threat actors of today are highly skilled professionals. The cyber criminals are doing exactly the same thing that we are doing right now. They collaborate, they share information, they run projects, they run research, they buy and sell vulnerabilities among each other, and they're really good, and they're making a lot of money. So this is something that's really new to the industry.
They're collaborating, and they're doing it better than we are. So I think that's a big part of capitalism is competition, and it's very healthy. It makes people become the best as they can be. However, collaboration and working together and sharing information is definitely something that makes everyone stronger. It doesn't hinder us.
Yeah, and the other side of the threat actors are also the state-sponsored actors. Like we actually have cyber warriors, even up to regiment size, and you can imagine a regiment size compared to the Swedish Army. That's almost half of the size of the Swedish Army, and they could be after your company. So it's really hard to defend yourself in that context, and they are also very highly skilled. The IMO has recognized the shift in the industry, and have recently released a new guideline on cybersecurity. This guidelines covers all of the areas, and also takes into consideration the specific considerations that you have to think about in the shipping industry or in the maritime industry. Basically, it's that you have to identify your threats and your vulnerabilities and your assets. We heard Matt talk earlier today about digital assets and the digital enterprise, which increases this need. And then you have to assess your risks and also try to develop some good protection, and most of all, be able to respond and recover from an attack, because if you're facing 5,000 cyber warriors, it's really hard to avoid being compromised. You have to focus on to limit the breach, and maybe be able to get back as soon as possible to normal operations.
I'm just going to cover a few of the key takeaways that I've read. The IMO guidelines, MSC, such and such. Next.
Yes.
Critical systems on both IT and OT systems are running. Critical systems are both on IT and OT systems, from your navigational systems to your charting, your chart data, and interconnectivity systems, communication, the normal, how we collaborate, all that stuff. Specifically with the IMO guidelines, they pose the idea that life and limb is a main concern, especially on the water. You're basically SOL if things go wrong. And threats to systems can be both intentional and unintentional, and both can be equally problematic. It's not always advanced persistent threat. It's not always a threat actor that's causing harm. It can be your own people, and it can be mistakes or misconfigurations in your hardware, firmware, software. And information systems are not being segmented or segregated, and that's something that has to be done. Air gap networks are still at risk just because you're on the ocean or you're using a satellite a tunneling system or something like that, it doesn't mean that someone can't get on board, join your crew, throw a USB stick in somewhere, and then you have malware that's propagating throughout your devices. And this is a direct quote from the IMO guidelines. Guidelines suggest a risk management approach that is resilient and evolves as natural extension of the existing safety and security management practices. So it has to be seen as the same as overboard procedure. Someone falls overboard, you know exactly what to do. You have a risk, you have insurance for that. You're trained at that. All the crew know what's going on. And it points towards some of the best practices, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and the NIST Risk Management Framework, as well as 27001 series for the International Standards Organization, which is a little bit more advanced than just the NIST framework.
Yes, and we are quickly going through the different frameworks that the IMO is pointing at. So the NIST cybersecurity framework consists of a five-step process where you start with identifying your critical assets, your digital assets, and your level of risk that you're willing to take during operations. Then you define you're going to the protect phase, where you implement the controls that that's compared to your risk level and your the value of your assets. And then you have the detect phase, where you should be able to detect a denial of service attack or a breach with the help of those controls that you have implemented. And in the case of a breach or an attack, you should be able in the respond phase to actually take countermeasures against your attackers. And in worst case, you should also be able to recover from an attack. If you're hit by ransomware, for instance, you should be able to reinstall and go back to normal operations again. So it's a pretty straightforward five-step process. And this is something that, so from the history, we have been very focused on the protect phase, because you buy a lot of expensive equipment and fancy appliances and put into your IT systems. But this cybersecurity shift are making a lot more focus on the respond and recover phase, especially the detect and identify. So from my audits that we have done previously in Europe, companies are having difficulties with the identify process. If you go out to an IT manager and ask him, what are your critical assets? He might have a hunch, but his staff doesn't know. So it's really hard to identify what's really important for your business. And we're usually also seeing problems in the detect phase. A lot of companies have a lot of good stuff installed, a lot of controls implemented in the protect phase, but the ability to detect something it's fairly common that this is a low capability area. So a lot of companies are fairly blind to actual attacks. Another framework that IMO is pointing at is the critical security controls. This was formerly a SANS framework, but now it's a CIS, Center for Internet Security. And this is a very lightweight approach that anyone can take on. Those 20 controls are already prioritized in 3 different levels. So you have basic, foundational, and organizational levels. And if you focus on the first 6 of them, you can decrease your risk of being attacked by 85% actually. So with small measures, you can actually avoid becoming that easy target. And that's also something very important to remember. It's that you have to avoid you don't have to be best in class installing all the expensive stuff and you don't have to be certified according to information security standard, but it helps to do even very small steps to improve your security posture. So the basic ones are actually a lot around boring, mundane stuff like patching your systems, checking your logs, making administrators don't have access to everything, etc. So it's actually not that fancy stuff at all. It's really day-to-day work. That's the difference between being attacked and not attacked.
Well, you'll see that in smaller companies too, or smaller organizations or smaller offices. Is you'll see one person who's the everything, who's in charge of everything. They're in the comms closet. They're doing the first line. They're doing the second line. They're doing everything for your organization, and that is bad. That is bad. You'll find if they leave your organization, and it's one of these insider threats. They leave your organization, and they don't quite like how they left your organization. They can lock down everything, and then you have something that happened in San Bernardino County in California, where a local administrator for the town shut down everything, and well, he's in jail now. He was just mad at how he left the organization, and they shut down for a while, right? So there's always that threat.
And on the more heavier scale of frameworks and standards that you can also go for the 27000 series. This is an international ISO standards. You can also get certified according to this. So this one covers a lot of stuff around the organization, policies, asset management, human resource awareness among your staff. That's very important, as Justin mentioned earlier. But this is a lot of work to get certified. So instead of the 20 controls you saw earlier, this standard is over 130 controls that you have to consider to be certified. So this is a big job if you're going this way, but you can get certified, and this is a quality mark for your enterprise. But the important thing that we mentioned a bit is that you have to actually think of it as not a technology issue. It's also around people and processes. So you have the PPT triangle. That's what we're trying to show here, because things that we hear when we are out meeting our customers, it's, oh, that's already outsourced. That's a common misconception, that you're covered if you outsource it, but you're still responsible for your customers' information. And we had a major breach last summer in Sweden. Maybe you know that the transport agency outsourced all the IT systems, including driver's license, register, etc., to Serbia. And we actually lost 3 ministers and 1 head of agency due to that scandal. So getting things outsourced is not the solution.
The Equifax breach, the CEO is being held responsible for that. So.
Yeah. And then you can have the technical approach. So we buy that expensive appliance that will cover us. And then you forget that you have to install the new patches, and you have to look into what that appliance actually producing, what kind of information you're getting. So don't forget your processes and your people to be able to make use of those expensive equipments. Another popular approach is just we wait until something happens and then we get started. That's also a bit of a downside on that approach. It's really hard to get back into normal operations if you're having a breach or if you're being attacked. That could really cost you a lot of money and a lot of problems with your customers if that happens. Another misconception is that the bad guys are only going after the big companies, and that's actually very wrong, because the attackers will always go for the path of least resistance. They will find the easiest way to get into your company or your digital assets. And especially in an environment like this, where you have a big ecosystem of big and small companies, you could easily become a target by having a customer that has a customer that has a customer that has a partner or something. And if you're an easy way in, they will use you.
I'm going to cover some of the threats I've identified specifically in maritime industries over my research into the IMO guidelines and guidelines on shipping in the shipping industry. But it's cross discipline. The ocean is connected. Everyone that's working in it in this industry is going to be affected by similar threats. Critical systems being out of date. You have like the previous, what you said, 1980s technology. I don't know if you know the difference between system and user level privileges. System means when you tell a machine to do something, it does it. A lot of these 1980s technology, when you tell a machine to do something, it does it. It doesn't matter who's telling it to do it. So that's a problem. These machines, not only information technology, but operational technology has to be life cycled and has to be taken into consideration. Ransomware. This 2017 has been highlighted for ransomware across different industries, not only maritime, but from the news you've probably heard several different forms of ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Relating to supply chain, now NIST, US NIST version 1.1 has highlighted, like Jan was saying, path of least resistance. You have third parties, and you have third parties for them, and you have third parties for them. They'll find a way, they will use it, and they will get in. So you have these poor InfoSec practices with one, you trust them, and that's a way in. Cybersecurity incident, which corrupts chart data held in electronic chart display and information systems. You could just imagine what that would do, especially with autonomous craft. RF communications and navigation systems vulnerable to jamming, ECM disruption, and other types of manipulation. When you have autonomous systems that are just taking information from a satellite and it gets, you have 1980s technology performing these controls, then you have a ship that is being directed to a location and controlled by someone else. Say you had a example below sea level. There's you wanted to say that?
The below sea level?
Yeah, Holland.
The Holland has made, as you know, a large part of Holland is actually below sea level. So they have built a lot of dams to create more land for the country. And imagine if you send in a ship into one of those dams, you can flood a third of Holland in a day. That's a good example.
I don't think it's a good example. This is all very, I don't want to scare everyone because this is, it is tough stuff, and yeah, but it's the reality that we're living in, and we always have to be more mindful of it, right? Your global navigation satellite system, yeah, disruption of that. Piracy and criminal organizations tracking unsecured shipping manifest routes and communications. So Jan had another.
Yeah, we had there was one story on a shipping insurance company that was breached, and they couldn't find out what they actually were looking for. Nothing was missing. They hadn't been attacked by ransomware, and after a while, they were just watching their behavior, and then suddenly they realized that they were only picking out the most expensive ships that were passing by outside of Somalia. So they were actually just preparing the piracy attacks in Somalia. So that's a good example of not destroying anything and the industry of cyber criminality.
Just I don't want to steal the thunder of the next presenter, but blockchain is a definite bonus to these shipping manifests and securing information, especially in these shipping industries. The integrity of the information as well as hashing. But I'm sure Mark Campbell will talk about that. And should an oil tanker be compromised by an attack that led to a spill, if we use electric boats, we won't have to worry about oil spills, will we? But no, that'd be great. But you know how an oil spill can create problems across all of these types of industries. shipping is rerouted or it's stopped for a while. You shut down operations for days. You're losing valuable money. You're losing product in the ocean that has to be recovered. You're losing, and the non-quantifiable asset that you're losing is reputation. And reputation in a company is hard to gain back once you lose it.
Yes. So a few conclusions from our presentations around cybersecurity, and I think this is something to really stress in this environment with the supercluster and the COVE and all these initiatives. You're attracting a lot of money, and then you will also attract a lot of bad guys who are trying to take care of that money. So the conclusions from this session is that you use the IMO guidelines. They're really good. They're really an easy way to get started with cybersecurity controls. And as IMO has already stated that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of stuff on different kinds of levels that can actually help you out to define your risks, to define the controls you want to implement, and also start to be able to respond and recover from an attack if that occurs. And you also have that maritime dilemma with ICS, industrial control systems, operational technology versus IT. And I think that what IMO is pointing out, that these are actually merging right now. So you have to consider both safety issues and also security issues in your work. And that's pretty much what the fourth bullet was about, to actually use what you already have in your businesses around safety and expand that into awareness also, not only on safety issues, but also on security issues. So you don't click on those mails that arrives in your inbox with a funny link to something. And it's also very important to remember that you don't have to be best in class, as long as you're not the worst in class. That will give you a lot of cover in the future. I would like to end this presentation with a short story around two men with they were going out in the wilderness for camping, and one of them said, "Oh, well, we can go out tomorrow. I only have to buy a new pair of sneakers." And the other guy said, "Why are you buying sneakers? We're going into the wilderness. You need boots." But we might run into a bear, he said. And the other guy just laughed. "A bear? Do you think you can outrun a bear?" And the other guy said, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I only have to outrun you." So that's pretty much about cybersecurity. Don't be the worst in class. And we're here to help if you're having problems. So thank you very much for this presentation.
Cheers, thank you.